You are tuned into the Dr. Tyna Show with Dr. Tyna Moore. For more, visit drtyna.com. On this episode of the Dr. Tyna Show, I'm going to be sharing with you my 5 simple and potent steps that I would take if I had any say in the Make America Healthy Again movement. I am all for this movement. I am super excited that it's happening. I, in no way, shape, or form, have any intention of throwing anyone under the bus who is a part of this. However, that said, the most notable step I've seen happen thus far since this started was a congressional hearing, or I guess a senatorial hearing, with a functional medicine doctor, a standard allopathic doctor, 2 exceptional physicians, by the way. Absolutely big fan of both. Dr. Casey Means made such an incredible point that I hope most of my followers know by now, which is most medical programs, medical school programs, do not have a lick of nutritional training in them. Or if they do, it's just a few hours. Whereas naturopathic medical programs, accredited naturopathic medical programs, not the fake schools, not the online health coaching programs, the actual 4-year institutions where you sit for national boards, the real schools, the accredited ones. There's only a few of them in the United States. Those schools, that's where I went. I went to one, national, here in Portland. We had hundreds of hours of nutritional training. And so we learned from a root cause standpoint how to address chronic care patients. That's literally what the entire program was about, was how do we go about implementing lifestyle management and non-invasive or more conservative treatment plans to help optimize patients' wellness, where we're a team working together. Some compare it to health coaching. It is only with 4 years of differential diagnosis, pathophysiology, lab diagnosis from a functional medicine perspective, by the way. We are not MDs who became functional medicine doctors. That's a whole different paradigm. That's a whole different certification program. This is literally what we were trained on. And I didn't see any of those types of physicians up there. And that part was a bit, it was frustrating for me. I just, full disclosure, I want nothing to do personally with being up on a stand or being anywhere in front of government policymakers right now. Like, I really am happy with my life and I'm trying to lay low. So I'm not suggesting that I was looked over or looked past. There are several influential naturopathic physicians and good functional medicine physicians who could have spoken to the chronic illness situation that we've got in our country and shared case studies, right? Like, this is what we've been doing in the trenches for the past however many decades. There's several of us with big followings, could have picked any one of them, who have been doing this for decades. Not just most recently, the MD who goes through the program of medical school and realizes the allopathic system is, the model is marred with issues. And so then they come around to our way of thinking. I'm talking people who chose that path from the beginning. There's a lot of physicians in the online space with big followings that I think would have been really great up there with real clinical experience. Not to say the physicians up there didn't have clinical experience, but you know what I'm getting at. With case studies to share with these folks some real world examples of the potential of this type of medicine. And again, this isn't just about naturopathic medicine. This is about any kind. I know functional medicine practitioners. I know doctors who never trained in functional medicine who are more functional medicine than the brand new functional medicine doctors. They've been doing this for decades. Lots of cool older guys and gals that have been working in their clinics for decades doing really root cause medicine. And some of us have big followings and could have had some influence that way too. So that part I hope gets more incorporated. I hope that those types of doctors who really have been in the trenches for decades doing this kind of work get an opportunity to have an opinion and to share it in some of these bigger forums. So that part I'm excited and looking forward to whoever's running this movement. I could tell you a list of doctors that you could invite in. Again, I'm not asking to be invited. I just think that was a missing piece. The other missing piece is that I kept seeing these posts going around saying Fruit Loops in Canada don't have all of the artificial flavorings and chemicals and colorants that Fruit Loops in the United States do. And we're going to go to Kellogg's and we're going to petition for them to change their cereal. And we're going to get the artificial colors and the chemicals out. But then you go and read the ingredients list for the Canadian version or the UK version, and it's still garbage. It's still complete garbage. So I was super confused when that was happening. I was like, have we lost the plot? I say this with all due respect and love. And I know a lot, and I said it on my stories, and people came at me and said, well, it's a start. And I'm like, yeah, kind of. How about we just don't eat Kellogg's? How about we just boycott Kellogg's altogether? Which is ultimately what they ended up doing. The movement went that way. They went to Kellogg's. They protested out front. They had the petitions. Kellogg's would not open their doors. So immediately the movement shifted to let's cancel Kellogg's. Let's boycott Kellogg's. And I'm sitting here thinking, I wouldn't, like, I've never allowed my daughter, she's 24. I never allowed Fruit Loops in her mouth in the first place. And you can call me snobby if you want, but I was hip to this a long time ago. This is not my first rodeo. And I'm not dissing anyone who's just come around to waking up to what's going on with the food supply. Like, welcome to the cause. But I've been at this a really long time, and there's just no Fruit Loops anywhere in our house. There's no Fruit Loops. There's no place for Fruit Loops in a human diet, period. Canadian version, American version. The Canadian version, the first ingredient is sugar. And the second ingredient is basically some kind of highly processed cornmeal. Like, it's just garbage. Like, that's the human kibble. Cereal is literally human kibble, especially the way that they process the grains. There is some information out there suggesting that when you high heat rice, for instance, to make it dry out and puff like that, you're doing something to it that's really not great downstream in the body. So there's just no cereal. There's no place for cereal in a healthy human diet, in my opinion. If you want to eat some kind of granola made out of whole grains, not a huge fan, but I definitely do put a little tiny bit of granola on my food sometimes for flavor, maybe a little bit of sweetener with, honey, sweetened granola. If you want to have some kind of cereal once in a while as like a treat, but it's not breakfast. There's like no place in my head where cereal is breakfast, because the root problem here is that the childhood obesity epidemic is being driven by metabolic dysfunction. And so replacing a chemical laden, artificial dyed laden cereal with a ultra processed carbohydrate, GMO grain with sugar as the first ingredient on the label is not a solution. This is not what we put in our children's mouths if we want them to have good insulin signaling throughout the day. This is not the first food we choose in the morning. That's the ultimate way to jack up their insulin response all day long and have it go haywire and make them hungry again by 10 a.m. How many of you, I'm guilty. I grew up eating cereal. I get it. And my parents thought they were doing me a favor. And I would eat cereal in the morning before I went to school because you have to eat something, Tyna. So I'd eat cereal. And by 10 a.m., I was passed out on my desk. And the next thing I wanted was coffee and a donut, right? Like, it's not a great process to go through. This is blood sugar dysfunction. We're doing it to our children by feeding them refined, ultra refined carbohydrates, sugar laden, ultra refined carbohydrates. I don't care if the colorants are real and the chemicals are out. Like, you see what I'm getting at? Start the day with protein. Start them with real protein, like eggs and bacon and some kind of, maybe some meat from the night before, leftovers. If you're vegan or vegetarian, fine, go for it. Whatever you want to do. I can't counsel you because I have not a clue where that fits into a healthy human diet either. Don't come at me. That's just where I stand. It's okay. We can have different opinions. I was a vegetarian for 10 years, wrecked my health. I've had a very difficult time getting vegetarian patients and vegan patients healthy, but I do know some of you exist out there, and more power to you. I think genetically you probably got a different inclination, and it's not one size fits all. But I do know that starting with a good source of protein in the morning is probably the best way for all of us humans to start our day and have our blood sugars regulated. So I pause because I get that it's a start, but also there are a huge group of us who just haven't been eating Kellogg's for decades. And so it reminds me of the time when I had a patient who got diagnosed with cancer, and she came in and she said, "You'd be so proud of me. I quit drinking Coca-Cola every day." She was having a Coke every day, or I don't know, some kind of soda. We all call it Coke or whatever. She was having a soda every day, and she decided to replace it with diet soda. And I was like, no, no, you've lost the plot. You see what I'm getting at? If we really want to address the root cause of what's happening to our children and their ill health as a whole, as the epidemic, then we need to address the big, dare I say, elephant in the room, because it's glaringly obvious that the problem is metabolic dysfunction at its core. It's insulin resistance, and it's lack of muscle mass, and it's lack of exercise, and it's lack of sunlight, and it's lack of proper sleep, and it's lack of proper nutrition of a whole foods, nutrient dense diet. It's not, let's replace snacky, crappy food with healthier, snacky, crappy food. That's just my opinion. Every time I voice it, people freak out. So I'm sure you guys are going to have a heyday in the comment section on YouTube or wherever else you listen to this. But that's my opinion. Replacing your snacks with keto snacks or replacing your ultra processed snacks with healthier versions that have less ingredients but are still ultra processed and come in a box or a package is not the solution, guys. Like, you shouldn't be eating that, period, in my opinion. There's no place for that in a healthy diet. If you want to have something like this once in a while, because I know the number one thing that I hear from my followers is, well, you don't have kids, you don't understand. Yes, I do have a child and I do understand. And yes, I get it. After the soccer game or after at the birthday party or whatever, we cheat. We have cheat days, right? We're going to have the snacky food. But I taught my daughter early on when she would have a complete meltdown after eating something that was laden with a ton of sugar and artificial colors, and her brain would light on fire and she would have a total meltdown. As she's crying and melting down, I would explain to her what was happening. You aren't just tired. You ate a bunch of food you're not used to, and your brain doesn't know what to do with it. And she's was very sensitive, as was I. I'm going to tell you a story in a minute about red dye in the M&Ms, and you will maybe see where I'm going with this. But I would explain to her, like, this is how food impacts you. So make your choices. We all make choices. Make your choices wisely, because this is what a whole gob of foods that aren't really food are going to do to you. This is how you react. You teach the young kids cause and effect. I don't think most adults understand cause and effect. They eat whatever all day long. Whereas when you eat a whole foods diet and you eat very simply and you don't eat a bunch of processed junk with a bunch of ingredients and a bunch of chemicals, my top rules, is step number one, is teach everyone how to read a food label. And I'll teach you what I teach my patients and what I teach when people ask me, but getting people to understand what they're putting in their mouth. And when you simplify it down to just whole foods diet, if you do have a reaction or you have some kind of histamine response, or you have some kind of emotional response, or your sleep's disrupted, or your joints hurt, or whatever, or your stomach hurts, or you get a rash, you can go back and say, what did I eat the past 3 days? And if you keep it really simple, it's pretty easy to point your finger at, like, okay, here's where I maybe veered off path, right? But if you're just consuming garbage all day in the form of ultra processed foods that come in packages with a ton of colorants, not to mention the inside of the package, you guys, most of those are lined with chemicals that are forever chemicals and or microplastics. If that's how your diet is on the daily, how are you ever supposed to put two and two together when you have some kind of symptom picture popping off, right? And you don't feel good. You're like, I mean, how do you put it together? You can't. So anyway, that was the first thing I taught my daughter. So my number one proposal for making America healthy again would be to teach people what's in their food supply and teach kids. Let's talk about educating kids first, because when we talk about food choices and we talk about the obesity crisis in children and we talk about how we're going to address that, what people fail to realize is that the parents who are providing the food, an 8-year-old kid can't be like, hey, mom, I want to eat totally different than the rest of the family. So can you cook me a whole different meal? We have to address the parents. We have to address the education level and the willingness and ultimately the goals and beliefs of the parents and the family, right? And that is a monumental hill to climb. But I do know if we teach kids and the kids come home from school and they say, hey, mom and dad, guess what I learned in school today? The parents tend to listen, especially if they respect the school. So we have to start there. We have to start with education. Kids are excited. Kids are open books. Kids are willing to learn. Kids want to learn. I remember 10 years ago, my friend was a 5th grade teacher, and she told me that when she would show kids pictures of whole foods like chicken breast, vegetables, fruits, most kids in her class at that time couldn't even identify what they were being shown. That's how bad it was. That was 10 years ago, you guys. So I cannot imagine things have gotten any better since. And since curriculums have really veered in different directions as of recent past, I'm sure that proper nutrition is sort of, on the back burner. I know when my daughter was in school that she was getting into literal fights with her health teacher in high school. And she would be texting me in class to help back her up because she was being taught a bunch of garbage, a bunch of food pyramid, or I guess at the time it was the healthy plate, all this nonsense. And she's like, no, it's about insulin resistance. It's about metabolic health. But, how does a ninth grader explain that well? So I'd have to, teach her what I knew. And then she would go tell her teacher. And then it was creating a lot of rift. And I got called into the school a few times to have discussions about these things. So I know this is an uphill battle, but we have to teach these kids proper nutrition. You guys, if you've been following me, you know I've told you all 100 times, your best bet to surviving in this crazy world is to learn some basic nutrition. And that's why I'm always here trying to teach you guys the basics, or taking really complicated ideas and distilling them down into basics, because I want you to own it. When you own it, you're empowered. Right. And so you taking it upon yourself to learn basic nutrition, I think, is absolutely critical if you want to try to navigate this system and this crazy world, because the food supply is so jacked. So those of us in the know 20, 30 years ago, we just knew we had to boycott the food supply. So that's what I'm getting at. Like, we're splitting hairs over here trying to make a dent in Kellogg's. Like, Kellogg's does not give a fuck. So they're in business to do what they do for a very specific reason. And that is to get you addicted to the foods that they're supplying you, so you will eat more of them. That is what big food does. We've known this since the 90s. This is not new information. They have a bliss point. They have scientists in a lab figuring out what the perfect bliss point is of this sugar, sweet, salt combo that will make you want more and more and more. So my best advice always has been, don't eat shit in packages. That's it. I'm sorry if that ruffles feathers. I'm sorry if that's challenging for people, but you convincing yourself that your keto paleo snack, if it's not made out of meat and salt, it's not, don't put it in your mouth. Like, that's just, if you want it once in a while, sure. There's some food bars out there that I'll eat once in a while. I'll pack with me. I do like jerky or a meat stick, but like, I'm not eating ultra processed foods. Interestingly, I think one of the least damaging foods we could eat, I mean, acrylamides aside, that are not great for your cells, would be potato chips, like a simple potato chip. It's sliced potatoes with salt, fried in an oil. Hopefully we find it in like an avocado oil or an oil that's not a seed oil. But you get my drift. Like, those are some of the most simple snacks we can lean towards. I'm not here to teach you about snacking, though. I don't think snacking is a great idea for your metabolic system. At the end of the day, it's not good for your blood sugar levels. So anyway, you get what I'm saying. And that starts with how to read a food label. So I used to go to my daughter's school and I would teach her classes how to read food labels. And here's the rules. If you can't pronounce it, don't eat it. I have a chemistry background, so I have a better, I mean, I obviously had to go through pre-med and med school and get chemistry. So I have some chemistry in my background. If I don't know what it is, I'm not eating it. The first 5 ingredients on the label are what are highest in the food. So if the first ingredient's sugar, you can bet that the bulk of what's in there is sugar. It's not sugar and then on and on and on, and they all have equal standing. That is for instance, if you think you're drinking a juice and the first ingredient is water and the second ingredient is high fructose corn syrup and the 8th ingredient is apple juice, you're not drinking apple juice. You're drinking some kind of sugary sweetened drink that has apple on the label. You get what I'm laying down here? So the first 3 ingredients really are the bulk of what you're consuming when you eat that food. So make those count. They better be something that you can ingest and you feel comfortable about eating. This is why we got to learn basic nutrition, and we got to teach it to our kids. So I don't have the answer. I don't know how to even get past the school boards, but I'm telling you, the nutrition training and the school systems is garbage. It's been garbage. It's been garbage for longer than I can remember. I'm pretty sure it was garbage when I was in there. We have to get kids understanding what proper foods are, what proper nutrition is. It's a great time to start because their taste buds are not set in stone yet. What you feed a child for the first 10 years of its life will dictate its microbiome for potentially life. That's not to say we can't shift a microbiome, but it gets real hard after that. We really get some keystone players in there, and they stick around no matter what throughout life. And so we have to get these kids eating well in the first 10 years of their life. And the only way to do that is to get them excited and get them knowledgeable. And hopefully they'll bring it home and it will trickle down to their parents. And then we have opportunities through education, through federal funding, to teach parents how to do better. We can do that a myriad of different ways. We have the internet. Anything's possible at this point. So anyway, that's step number 1. Step number 2 would be to make America fit again. This really is the crux. I'll tell you 2 stories. First, let me finish the food story, the food dyes. I was in 8th grade when M&M's decided to introduce red food dye, I believe number 5, into their M&M's. And suddenly the big deal was, we have a red M&M. And that was the big marketing thing. Like, oh, there's a red M&M. And everybody was so excited. Well, I went to a party and I decided to sit down and eat every red M&M in the bowl, giant bowl. It was a Halloween party, so it's, appropriate for this time of year. Giant bowl of M&Ms. I picked out all the red ones and ate them. What happened from there? Came home from the party, went to bed, woke up in the morning. My entire front room was blockaded. My mom had moved all the furniture up against the door. Everything was locked, triple locked, furniture everywhere, blocking all the doors. I asked what happened. Turns out I got up, stepped over my best friend who was laying on the floor because she spent the night. She was sleeping in the trundle bed, stepped over her, walked out the front door in my t-shirt and underwear. That was all I had on. Walked to the neighbor's house, knocked on the door, had a conversation with my neighbor. He was so scared that something was wrong that he went to, go get something to protect us if there was, he thought something terrible. I had my pillow in my hands and I was completely asleep, and I'm having a conversation with him at the front door. He walks me home, gets me back in the house, tells me to lock the door, hears it click, and he goes home. And I believed he called my parents at that point and told them what happened. Or maybe he walked me back and talked to them. I can't remember. I don't know. I was asleep. Point is that's what the red dye number 5 did to me. I had a complete sleepwalking episode. Now, I had been a bedwetter. So I had had a long history of food allergies. That's a food allergy symptom predominantly. I'd been a bedwetter. I'd had night terrors. I had some sleepwalking. I ate a lot of processed foods. I really loved junk food. I loved processed foods. And, the processed foods in the 80s were not the processed foods we have today. I think the chemicals in there were a lot less, but I still had issues. You know what happened after that? I never ate red dye number 5 again. It didn't take anything else. That was terrifying to me. And I could have walked all the way down the street. I could have walked somewhere that wasn't so friendly. So that said, I just never ate food dye again. I mean, that was it. I just didn't eat food dye again. I also gave up soda that day. I quit drinking soda. I was like, no more soda for me. I didn't know if it was the soda I'd had because I knew that I liked orange soda, and orange soda has the orange food colorants. I remember in high school getting in fights with friends because I was like, why are you drinking Mountain Dew? It's neon. Like, why would you put that in your body? So I'm sharing this with you. I'm not the sharpest crayon in the box. I know some of you guys think I'm really smart. I just pay attention. I saw Theo Vaughn. He was interviewed, and I think it was Tucker Carlson asked him, like, how'd you know what was going on throughout the last 4 years? And he was like, I'm just a human and I pay attention. And I'm like, yeah, you just pay attention to what's going on, right? Like, you just look at all the parts moving and you make a decision. So I gave up soda. I gave up artificial colorants that day. Not a big deal. If we teach kids what it's doing to them, there's a lot of kids struggling and they get called bad kids, or they're disruptive kids, or their kids really causing problems. And then they get put on ADD or ADHD medications. And really it's because they live off of junk food and processed foods. Whenever we have some kind of tragedy happen and a young person's involved and acts out in a violent way, I always ponder, like, what was this kid's diet like? Was his brain on fire? Kids don't want to act like this. Kids don't want to always be the troublemaker and be in trouble. I know that we could analyze a lot of things from a emotional, behavioral point of view, psychological point of view. I know that's how things are usually addressed in young children, but I'm always over here like, what are they eating? Are they living off like convenience store food? Is their mom around paying any attention to what's going in their mouth? Because most kids live off garbage. I did. I grew up eating garbage and I paid dearly for it as I got older. So we got to start by educating these kids. When I was in my busy clinical practice and I was seeing tons of patients a day and I was doing predominantly regenerative injection therapies, I was doing prolotherapy, PRP stem cells and such. I can tell you that there was one dividing factor between who I knew would respond beautifully and who I wasn't sure about, and that was muscle mass. That said, some of these guys with a lot of great muscle who were strength training consistently had garbage diets. They drank Mountain Dew. They ate Totino's pizza bites. I don't know how they got such good muscle mass because they ate garbage, but they had great muscle and they always healed really beautifully. That's one of the first reasons I got into strength training. My mentor had been telling me to strength train forever. And then I started seeing all these patients, and like the one deciding factor of who was going to get better and who wasn't. I had patients that were colleagues that were naturopathic doctors who were like skinny and frail and vegan and ate super clean, even if they weren't vegan, ate super clean, wouldn't even eat out of plastic. Everything came out of glass or a jar. Like, all the water was filtered. Everything was perfect, but they were so frail and deconditioned that their labs were a mess and they didn't heal well. So muscle clearly has a metabolic impact beyond just all the things I've talked about. As I have mentioned, it really impacts your immune system and how that works. And your immune system isn't just to protect you from invaders. Your immune system's there to help you heal your tissues. So muscle matters. And if we have a bunch of kids who are generally speaking, walking around with too much adipose tissue. If you were to run DEXA scans on all of them, they're all under muscled. So are the adults. We've got frailty compounded by inflammatory adipose. Adipose tissue at its core is inflammatory, especially as these kids get older. When they're young, it's not as noticeable and their labs are not that striking. It's when they start to age that I see their labs shift. And I'm like, oh, this suit of adipose tissue that you've been walking around with in excess has been okay until it's not okay. You've heard me talk about this when those fat cells decide to go rogue. So we have frailty in the muscle mass department and we have excess inflammation in the adipose department, and that's combined on a young body. And we wonder why we're having so many issues in our young people. This is just not conducive to good brain health. It's not good. It's not conducive to good brain mass. It's not conducive to brain optimization, brain function. There's a lot of potential issues with this. And we can argue about the food all day. And yes, let's argue about the food. Like, let's still change the food supply, guys. Like, I think that's a noble cause. But what if we just taught everybody to boycott the snack food industry? And we give people too little credit. We're like, oh, well, they're addicts, so we have to somehow control the food. That's a pretty socialist way of thinking. I mean, I even heard RFK say, let's ban Ozempic and take that money because it's going to bankrupt America. And then he says, imagine if we could provide healthy meals, 3 meals a day for every family in America. That's what we could do with that type of money. And I'm like, who's going to actually do that? Because people are addicts. They're going to go to Starbucks. They're going to go to McDonald's. They're going to go to these places. What if we taught them about the garbage that they're eating when they go there? What if we utilize that, right? And then what if we brought back physical fitness and we strategically implemented fitness strategies that would work for these people? Because I could go on a whole tirade about what happened when we got rid of the Presidential Physical Fitness Awards. That was disbanded in 2013 by the administration at that time because it was not inclusive and it was making kids feel left out. Rightfully so. There were, the winners and the losers, and that's how that worked. But that's how sport is. So that's a whole other conversation, actually, that has little to do with fitness and more to do with society and sociology. Because the minute we actually started giving everybody ribbons and awards, we saw what happened to society. And we saw what happened to kids' resilience. It kind of all just went downhill from there, didn't it? So I'm on the side. I like a good, healthy competition. I do. I do want to make fitness available to everyone. And kind of part of the gauntlet of getting through your youth is I was never particularly talented in sports at all. And I know getting dressed up for PE, like having to get into the PE uniform could be uncomfortable. Actually having to perform in PE could be uncomfortable, particularly if it was something I was terrible at. Some things I was really good at, some things I was really terrible at. There were some kids that were great at everything, and we envied them and we looked up to them. But that also is just how sport is. And isn't that, I mean, we've had sport. That's the whole point of the Olympics. It goes back how far? Thousands of years of what sport means, right? And there's sportsmanship. That's all part of learning this. And so I don't remember ever making kids feel left out that weren't good at something. I remember trying to help them get through it, right? Like if you think of an obstacle course, we're not going to leave anyone behind. We're going to get our friends through it. And I really miss sport. I miss good competition. I miss when, I liked getting high grades and beating out the rest of my class. I liked performing well. There were things I was very good at in the world, and there's things that I'm terrible at. And I kind of like getting my ass handed to me sometimes because it makes me want to strive to be better at it. But when we evened out the playing field for everyone and everybody got a ribbon and we got rid of the Presidential Physical Fitness Awards and we made it more into a type of program where everybody has, the idea behind it was noble in that we make it more approachable. We make fitness more approachable, something that every child can incorporate into their lives. I'm totally for that strategy. It didn't work. And so now we're just at a place where PE has completely been obliterated from the school systems. The PE teachers are frustrated. I know because I hear from them because they're my followers. It's just a frustrating place to be, especially depending on politically where you're at, depending on what city you live in. A lot of PE teachers can't even just be PE teachers anymore. So, because we don't want to make anybody offended. We don't want to make anyone feel left out. We don't want anyone to cry. But there's something about being in a position where you are in tears in school. Like raise your hand if you've been made a fool of or you didn't perform in a way that you wanted to and you felt frustrated and you cried, very few times do I ever, and I moved a lot, you guys, I moved a lot. I have pretty privilege. I did at the time. I was a pretty young girl, pretty kid. And I was relatively in decent shape. I understand there's some privilege there. But that said, I don't recall having kids make horrendous fun of me. Like there's always a kid that stands up for you. We've just completely lost grit when it comes to our young people. And that's trickling out into young adults who are now, triggered by everything and need safe spaces. So it's a tricky one. I know. I wouldn't be able to lay out a strategic plan on how to make America fit again. But I can tell you that physical fitness is going to go a whole lot further for these kids' blood sugar, their mood, their brain strength, their intelligence, their success in life than arguing over artificial colorants in the cereal. Let's boycott all the junk food companies. Let's boycott all the companies that make colorful, snacky food, especially the ones that have characters on them, kids' characters, and put their stuff on the lower shelves so that the kids are like, oh, I want to eat this with the bunny rabbit on it. I want to eat this with the whatever on it. The ones that put cartoon characters on their fruit snacks, let's just boycott them all. Let's just teach our kids we don't eat that. Let's just teach our kids that doesn't come into our house. That starts with you guys as the adults, the ones of you watching this. That starts with you looking in the mirror and coming to an honest place in yourself. If you are a snack food addict, you're going to sit here and argue with me and write my comments on YouTube and tell me what a terrible person I am. Or you're going to take a hard look in the mirror and realize that you have a problem and you need to get over it, and you need to teach your kids to get over it. And you can have other types of snack food in the house. We can cut up fruits and vegetables. We can freeze grapes. We can get creative and make our own fruit leathers in a dehydrator. We can make our own chips, or we can go buy chips once in a while. Shoot, I go have chips, but you know what? Chips don't come in my house because they'll get obliterated because I am a potato chip addict. Totally admit it. So we don't bring ice cream in the house. We get little single servings of things, or we eat it outside. My husband and I will share a pint of ice cream, and we don't, that stuff doesn't make a regular appearance inside the home. We don't bring soda in the home. We just don't bring any of that crap in the home. If we're going to have it, we have it outside the house, and we don't go out that much. We cook most of our food at home. So let's make America whole food based again. Let's teach Americans how to cook again. Let's teach kids what the foods that they're choosing to eat. You are choosing to put food in your mouth, parents, and you're choosing what foods your children are putting in their mouth. We don't need convenient finger foods. Toddlers don't need the puffed snacks. I remember when my daughter was a baby, that's when they came out with those little puffed finger snacks for kids, and my mom bought them. And I was like, what are you doing? Those are Cheetos. Why are you feeding my kid Cheetos? Like, why is my infant daughter eating Cheetos? This stuff does not need to go in these kids' mouths. We don't need to take our kids through Dairy Queen drive-in or whatever you guys have going on, wherever you live, right? Like, that's you, parents. That's on you. That's you making convenience your priority, and that's you bringing your kids into it. And you're teaching your kids to how to eat that way, teaching them that is the way. It's okay to eat that way. Well, my parents did it, so it must be okay for me. You can get mad at me if you want. People get mad at me all the time about this. I have been telling my patients this for decades. This is how it is. So we have to first choose how it is that we're going to eat. And are we going to choose to bring these mega conglomerate corporations food? And they're all in bed with each other, right? Like, all these companies are somehow intertwined. So if you're adamantly, those of you who are so against the GLP-1s, but like, you choose to still take an arsenal of big pharma drugs, and you choose to eat all of these highly processed foods that are made by these industries that are all, if you just go up the ladder to megacorp and you see who owns what, you see it's all tied. So it just baffles me that like, we're against this, but all this is okay, right? So this is the tough love. This is why some of you love me and why some of you actually, cannot stand me and are going to unfollow me now. But this is it. Like, take a good look in the mirror. Look at what you're choosing to eat. Look at what you're choosing to bring in the house. Look at how you're choosing to live. And then take a good look at what you're teaching your children. And that's it, right? So I say we just boycott Kellogg's and go up the tree. I mean, who owns them, right? Like, I remember when I was 16, I figured out that there was things that was nefarious going on coming out of Procter and Gamble, and I decided to boycott them as best I could. And I was 16 and I did a whole report on it. And I remember having to go into the laundry soap we were using and go into this and that and the other because I didn't like what they were doing in one category. And therefore, there were all these other things I had to make myself aware of. This is how it works. It's a little tough. It's a tough, jagged pill to swallow. I remember going into my best friend's house years ago when her kids were little and opening the cabinets under her sink. And I'm like, this is all poisonous. Like, you can't have this in your house if you've got babies around. You just can't. Like, you have to start changing things out. We had to go through beauty products. We had to take some really hard looks at things. And it took a while, right? This is a process. So I invite you to embark on the journey and just start. Just get curious, start looking. You'll see at the bottom on the back of the label of whatever it is you're using, whether it be hand soap, laundry detergent, dish soap, shampoo, you'll see who owns them. You'll see who ultimately owns them, or get on the Google and start looking and then look at the foods you're eating. Who owns them? Who manufacturs them? Forget just the ingredients and start looking deeper. And like, why don't we start boycotting those companies if we really want to make America healthy again? We have to take a hard look at our entertainment and the information we are ingesting. And we have to make some decisions about who we're following, what TV programs we're watching, what are we choosing? You know, the TV is really just at night, you're sitting down and you're choosing what you are going to accept being programmed by. And you're doing that as you're scrolling on your phone. You're accepting what's programming you. And if you watch regular television, not a streaming device, but a regular television, like live TV, I guess they call it on the apps now, watch what they're trying to sell you. It's all pharmaceutical drug commercials and food, right? It's all junk food and pharmaceuticals. So if you're choosing to watch those shows, then you're choosing to be programmed by that content. So you have to take a really good hard look at that. I say, let's bring Jack LaLanne back. If you guys remember Jack LaLanne, he was a chiropractor, if you didn't know, really fit older guy. And he wore like sort of a black tight kind of unitard, and he'd come on every morning and he'd give you, I mean, it used to be in black and white. It was so old. He'd come on and give you the cold hard facts, and he would teach you some exercises, and he would teach you how to be healthy, and he would teach you how to be resilient. And I kept thinking in 2020, I was like, why don't they just put on public television? Unfortunately, I know a lot of public television channels are losing money and aren't getting the kind of support they need to even thrive or exist anymore. But I just imagine a world where we bring public television back, and we have, like PBS, and we have some kind of morning show instead of watching the morning shows where it's entertainment and it's news and it's stuff that gets people upset or just kind of, again, brainwashes them. Like, turn the freaking TV off, first of all, guys. But if we're going to watch something, why don't we bring back somebody who has some age and wisdom in them to teach America how to be healthy again, right? Some kind of programming, some kind of national government funded, federally funded public television show like Jack LaLanne, where we teach people how to eat and live and move and breathe properly even, and stress mitigation and how to go outside and what all the things I teach you guys and all these other influencers are teaching you. What if we taught everybody that? Because then it would be more broadly accepted. I volunteer. I kept saying in 2020, I'm like, let me on the TV, give me a program in the morning. I will get these people through. I will help them be more resilient, right? So I think we're off course so far that splitting hairs over the ingredients in something people shouldn't be eating anyway, I get that it's a start, but it's a lot of energy being put forth over something that ultimately, like, we shouldn't even, like, why are we even negotiating with the enemy in the first place? So I'll leave you guys with that. I hope I wasn't too inflammatory on this, and I hope that it brought you some value, and that, if anything, made you think more deeply about how it is that we're doing things. There's more to this. I understand there's more to unpack, and I don't have all the answers, but I know that making America healthy again really ultimately comes down to education, fitness, understanding of the foods that we're choosing to put in our mouths, the parental oversight that is happening for these children so that the parents are taking responsibility and accountability for what they are choosing to eat and how they're choosing to live. And on a federal level, we need better programming. If we're going to get brainwashed, let's get brainwashed with something healthy. So with that, I will bid you guys adieu. If you are listening to this on whatever podcast player you're listening on, please rate, review, and subscribe. That helps get the word out and it helps me reach more audience. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Comment below and comment in the show notes if you have the ability to, wherever you are listening to this or watching this. And much love to you all. And I really do hope that we have the opportunity in a few weeks to see somebody step in that will make America healthy again. Thanks for listening to the Dr. Tyna Show. This is a Wellness Loud production produced by Drake Peterson and mixed by Mike Fry. Theme song is by John the Guild. You can watch the full video version of this podcast inside the Spotify app or on YouTube. As always, you can email the podcast at podcast@drtyna.com. That's DRTYNA. And if you like this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can also find all of my offerings on my website at drtyna.com. For more shows by my team, go to wellnessloud.com. See you next time, and thanks for listening. This podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practices of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. I am a doctor, but I am not your doctor. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is intended not to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.